The iron door slammed shut behind Elena Moonshadow, its metallic echo reverberating through the damp stone walls of the wine cellar. Darkness enveloped her completely, save for a single shaft of moonlight streaming through a narrow window near the ceiling. Outside, the sounds of carriage wheels crunching on gravel announced her family's departure to the royal palace. The choosing ceremony had begun, and here she stood, forgotten in the shadows once again. Elena pressed her palms against the cold iron door, a futile gesture she had already attempted 3 times before accepting her imprisonment. Her stepmother Cordelia had been thorough, removing all potential tools that might aid in escape, leaving nothing but dusty wine racks and centuries-old bottles as Elena's silent companions for the evening. The click of the heavy lock had been Cordelia's final declaration of victory, accompanied by a smile that never reached her eyes. "You understand, Elena, dear," Cordelia had said, her voice a study in false sympathy. "Someone must tend to the household while we're away. Besides, the Alpha King would hardly notice someone like you among all those beautiful wolves." The moonlight caught Elena's features as she stepped back from the door. 19 years old, with hair dark as midnight and eyes that held the same deep blue as the evening sky. Not plain by any measure, but certainly not groomed and polished like her stepsisters Diana and Celine, who had spent months preparing for this single evening. Tonight, every unmated female wolf between 18 and 28 from all 7 packs would present themselves before Alpha King Mason Stormheart, ruler of the Northern Territories, as he fulfilled the ancient law requiring him to choose a mate before his 31st birthday. Every eligible female except Elena. In the royal palace 20 miles away, Mason Stormheart stood on his private balcony, watching as carriages arrived in the courtyard below. His imposing figure cut a stark silhouette against the twilight sky. Broad-shouldered and tall, with features chiseled from years of both leadership and battle. At 30, he commanded respect not through cruelty or intimidation, but through a quiet, assured strength that made even the most dominant wolves yield in his presence. Tonight, however, that strength felt hollow. "Your Majesty," came a graveled voice from the doorway, "the guests have begun to arrive. The council awaits your presence in the great hall." Mason turned to face Victor, his father's oldest friend, and now his most trusted advisor. The elderly wolf's weathered face showed concern beneath his formerly stoic expression. "Tell me again why we maintain this archaic tradition," Victor, Mason said, running a hand through his dark hair, silver at the temples despite his youth. "In this century, should we not have evolved beyond choosing mates like selecting breeding stock?" Victor approached, his movements deliberate, as he joined the king at the balcony. "Tradition provides stability, Your Majesty. The packs expect it. After the last border conflict with the Eastern Alliance, they need the reassurance of continuity. More practically, without a queen and eventually an heir, Governor Hammond and his allies on the council will continue their attempts to undermine your authority." Mason's jaw tightened at the mention of Hammond. The ambitious governor of the Iron Ridge province had been a thorn in his side since his coronation 3 years prior, constantly challenging his decisions, subtly questioning his fitness to rule. Hammond's hunger for power was as transparent as it was dangerous. And what of the curse, Victor? Do we simply ignore the fact that for 2 centuries, every first mate of a Stormheart king has died in childbirth? Am I to condemn some innocent woman to death for the sake of tradition? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of history. Victor's eyes, still sharp despite his 70 years, reflected understanding beyond mere duty. "This is why I came early," Victor said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "There is something I must show you before the ceremony begins." From within his formal coat, Victor withdrew a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "This belonged to your grandfather's advisor. I found it only last week, hidden in a compartment of his old desk I was finally clearing out." Mason took the journal, opening it carefully. Inside, faded ink detailed an account different from the official history he had been taught. "The curse is not what we believe," Victor continued as Mason scanned the pages. "The deaths were not random tragedy, but deliberate acts." Your ancestors' mates were targeted by those who feared a prophecy about a union between the royal line and what they called the Moon Silver Wolves, a bloodline thought to possess extraordinary power. Mason looked up sharply. Moon silver wolves, I've never heard of such a bloodline. They were hunted nearly to extinction during the Red War, their existence deliberately erased from our histories. Their distinguishing mark was a crescent moon symbol that appeared on the wrist when they came of age. Victor pointed to a detailed drawing in the journal. The prophecy spoke of a time when the last moon silver would unite with the Alpha King, breaking the curse and bringing a new era of peace. Mason studied the symbol, a perfect crescent moon, elegant in its simplicity. Something about it resonated within him, like a half-remembered dream. And you believe this bloodline still exists? I believe nothing happens without purpose, Your Majesty. The curse, the prophecy, the ceremony tonight. Perhaps fate has already selected your queen, regardless of our traditions. A knock at the chamber door interrupted them. Your Majesty, called a voice. The ceremony must begin shortly. Mason closed the journal, slipping it into his coat pocket. We'll continue this discussion later, he told Victor, straightening his formal attire. For now, let us play our parts in this grand performance. As he followed Victor toward the great hall, a strange sensation pulled at Mason's consciousness, a feeling of incompleteness, of someone missing, someone he had yet to meet. Back in the cellar, Elena had stopped trying to force the door and instead explored her prison by the dim moonlight. The Blackwood family estate was one of the oldest in Granite Hills territory, and this cellar predated even the main house. Running her hands along the stone walls, Elena felt the weight of history surrounding her. Generations of secrets embedded in rock and mortar. Her fingers caught on a peculiar indentation, almost invisible unless one knew to look for it. Curious, Elena pressed against it, feeling a slight give in the seemingly solid stone. A soft rumble followed, and a section of wall rotated slightly, revealing a narrow passage. A hidden tunnel, she whispered to herself, excitement momentarily overriding her despair. Before investigating further, Elena returned to the shaft of moonlight by the small window. She needed to think clearly. Escape might be possible now, but to what end? She wore simple home clothes, hardly appropriate for a royal ceremony. Even if she could somehow reach the palace, she would be turned away at the gates, possibly punished for trying to enter uninvited. And the repercussions from Cordelia afterward would be severe. As Elena stood considering her options, the moonlight intensified, bathing her in an unnatural silver glow. A sudden warmth spread through her left wrist, causing her to gasp in pain and surprise. Looking down, she watched in astonishment as her skin seemed to absorb the moonlight, forming a pattern beneath the surface. A perfect crescent moon. Elena stared at the mark, memories flooding back. Her mother, Iris, touching a similar mark on her own wrist years ago, whispering stories of their ancestors. One day, when the time is right, you'll understand who you truly are, she had promised. Elena had been only 7 when the fever took her mother, too young to fully comprehend the significance of those words. The hidden box in the attic. Elena's heart raced as connections formed in her mind. 2 months ago, while cleaning the rarely used attic, she had discovered a small wooden box with an unusual lock among her mother's few remaining possessions. Unable to open it, she had hidden it beneath a loose floorboard in her small room, intending to find a way to unlock its secrets. Now her wrist bore the key. Miles away, Mason stood at the center of the great hall, surrounded by hundreds of expectant faces. The ceremony had proceeded exactly as planned, with unmated females from each territory presented in groups, allowing the Alpha King to walk among them, searching for that indefinable connection that would signal his true mate. Yet after 2 hours, Mason felt nothing beyond polite appreciation for the beauty and accomplishments of the women before him. No spark, no pull, no sense of rightness that the elders described as accompanying the true mating bond. He maintained his composure, smiling and exchanging brief pleasantries, while an emptiness grew inside him. Governor Hammond approached, a daughter on each arm. Your Majesty, he bowed with practiced deference, may I present my daughters, Olivia and Penelope Hammond, of Iron Ridge. Mason acknowledged them with a nod, noting the calculating gleam in Hammond's eyes. The girls were certainly beautiful, with golden hair and refined features, but there was something rehearsed about their demure smiles that left him cold. Governor Hammond, Mason responded evenly, your daughters do your lineage credit. Olivia has been trained in diplomatic relations since childhood, Hammond continued, subtly pushing the elder daughter forward. She would make an exceptional partner in navigating our complex alliances. Before Mason could respond, a sharp sensation like an electrical current ran up his spine, momentarily stealing his breath. His wolf stirred within him, suddenly alert, searching for something, someone who wasn't present. Mason closed his eyes briefly, trying to identify the source of this sudden awareness. Your Majesty? Hammond's voice seemed distant now. Are you unwell? Mason opened his eyes, his senses heightened to an almost painful degree. Excuse me, he said abruptly. There's a matter I must attend to immediately. Ignoring the murmurs that followed his departure, Mason strode purposefully from the hall, Victor following close behind. Once in the private royal antechamber, Mason braced himself against the table, his breathing labored. What is it? Victor asked, concern evident in his voice. She's not here, Mason stated with absolute certainty, though he couldn't explain how he knew this. My mate isn't among those gathered. Victor's weathered face showed no surprise. Then where is she? Mason closed his eyes again, focusing on the inexplicable pull that had awakened within him. Granite Hills territory, he said finally. I can feel her, calling to me. In the wine cellar, Elena had managed to open the secret passage wide enough to slip through. The tunnel beyond was ancient but structurally sound, its walls carved directly from bedrock. Small crystals embedded in the ceiling emitted a faint blue luminescence, providing just enough light to navigate by. The mark on her wrist continued to glow with silvery light, pulsing gently like a second heartbeat. Along with it came a strange awareness, a feeling that something significant was happening, that her life was about to change irrevocably. Elena followed the tunnel, one hand trailing along the wall for guidance, her mind racing with questions. After what seemed like hours but was likely only 20 minutes, the passage began to slope upward. Eventually, it terminated at another hidden door. With trembling hands, Elena pushed against it, feeling the mechanism give way. The door swung outward, revealing the night sky above her. She had emerged in a small, forgotten garden at the edge of the estate's grounds, well away from the main house. The full moon shone directly overhead now, and as its light touched her face, Elena felt a surge of something wild and powerful awakening inside her. Her wolf, usually so quiet and submissive, rose to the surface of her consciousness, alert and eager in a way she had never experienced before. Then she felt it, a presence approaching. Someone was coming for her, drawn by the same inexplicable force that had awakened her wolf. Fear and anticipation mingled in her chest as she turned toward the forest edge, somehow knowing exactly where to look. Mason had left the palace with minimal escort, brushing aside concerns for propriety and protocol. Victor alone accompanied him, along with two trusted royal guards who knew better than to question their king's sudden urgency. They rode hard through the night, Mason following nothing but instinct and the strengthening pull in his chest. The Blackwood estate came into view, its windows dark except for a few servants' quarters. Mason dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, his movements fluid with predatory grace. Wait here, he commanded the guards. Victor, with me. As they approached the main house, Mason paused, his head tilting slightly as he focused his senses. No, he murmured. She's not inside. He turned abruptly, heading toward the southern edge of the property where an old garden lay neglected since the former lady's death. The pull was nearly painful now, his wolf pacing restlessly beneath his skin, eager to find what it sought with such certainty. And then he saw her, a young woman standing in a shaft of moonlight, her dark hair flowing loose around her shoulders, her simple dress a stark contrast to the elaborate gowns at the palace. She turned as if sensing his presence, and Mason felt the world shift beneath his feet. Their eyes met across the garden, and the bond snapped into place with an almost audible click, like the final piece of a puzzle finding its home. In that moment of connection, Mason knew with absolute certainty that the search was over. This was his mate, the one his wolf had been waiting for all along. Elena stood frozen as the imposing figure emerged from the shadows. Even without the formal attire, she would have recognized the Alpha King from the portraits that hung in every public building. Mason Stormheart, ruler of all 7 territories, most powerful wolf in the realm, was walking toward her with purposeful strides, his eyes never leaving hers. The mark on her wrist flared with blinding intensity as he approached, sending waves of warmth up her arm. Her wolf, normally so reluctant to show itself, pressed forward with unprecedented eagerness, recognizing something vital and necessary in this man's presence. They stopped an arm's length apart, neither speaking, the connection between them almost visible in the moonlight. Mason slowly extended his hand, palm up, a gesture both question and invitation. Elena hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. At the contact, images flashed through her mind, a shared future, moments of joy and struggle, a destiny intertwined so completely it was impossible to distinguish where one ended and the other began. "You're the one," Mason said, his voice deep and certain. "I felt you calling to me." "I wasn't calling," Elena replied softly. "I was locked away, hidden." Mason's expression darkened. Who would dare interfere with fate? Before Elena could answer, the sound of approaching carriages broke the moment. The Blackwood family was returning from the ceremony, no doubt confused and concerned by the royal horses waiting in their courtyard. The main house blazed to life as servants lit lamps and torches. Elena instinctively stepped back, the reality of her situation reasserting itself. She was the forgotten stepdaughter, dressed in work clothes marked with a strange symbol and somehow standing hand in hand with the Alpha King himself. "They can't know I left the cellar," she whispered urgently. "My stepmother will—" The protectiveness that surged through Mason at her fear surprised even him with its intensity. "No one will harm you," he stated with the absolute authority of an alpha. "Not while I draw breath." Victor, who had maintained a respectful distance, approached now. His eyes widened slightly as he noticed the glowing mark on Elena's wrist. "The crescent moon," he breathed. "Your moon silver." Elena looked between them in confusion. "I don't understand. My mother had a mark like this, but she never called it by any name. She died when I was young." "Your mother was Iris Blackwood?" Victor asked, recognition dawning on his weathered face. "Yes," Elena confirmed. "Did you know her?" "I knew of her," Victor replied carefully. "She was rumored to be the last of her line, but clearly she passed her legacy to you." The sound of voices grew louder as the Blackwood family approached the main house. Mason made a swift decision. "We'll continue this conversation somewhere safe," he said. "You're coming with us to the palace." "But my family," Elena protested weakly, though part of her thrilled at the possibility of escape. "Will be informed of their king's decision," Mason finished, his tone brooking no argument. The confrontation at the Blackwood estate unfolded like a perfectly orchestrated drama. Cordelia's face drained of color when she saw Elena standing beside the Alpha King, the hidden cellar door discovered and her deception exposed. Nathaniel Blackwood, Elena's father, appeared genuinely shocked to learn his daughter had been imprisoned. His years of negligence suddenly cast in the harsh light of royal scrutiny. "You locked your stepdaughter away during the choosing ceremony," Mason stated, each word dripping with barely contained fury. "An act of direct defiance against royal decree." Cordelia dropped to her knees, fear evident in every line of her body. "Your Majesty, please understand. Elena is unstable, unpredictable. We feared she might embarrass our family, our territory." "Lies," Mason growled, his eyes flashing gold as his wolf surged forward. "I can smell your deception." Diana and Celine stood behind their mother, their reactions markedly different. Diana's face showed calculation, her mind clearly racing to determine how this unexpected development might still work to her advantage. Celine, however, looked at Elena with what appeared to be genuine relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. Nathaniel finally found his voice. "Your Majesty, if I had known Cordelia had taken such actions, please believe me, I would never—" "Your ignorance does not absolve you," Mason cut him off coldly. "A father should know what happens under his own roof." Elena watched this exchange with a strange detachment, as if observing someone else's life unfolding. The mark on her wrist had dimmed to a subtle shimmer, but the connection to Mason remained strong, a tether anchoring her through the chaos. "Elena Blackwood bears the mark of the Moon-Silver Wolves," Mason announced, his voice carrying the weight of royal proclamation. "By ancient law and the will of fate itself, she is my chosen mate." Gasps echoed through the gathered household. Cordelia's head snapped up, naked fear replacing her previous subservience. Moon silver? That bloodline was extinguished generations ago. Evidently not, Victor commented dryly. Mason's eyes narrowed at Cordelia's reaction. You know of the Moonsilver Wolves, he observed. Interesting, considering that knowledge was purged from our official histories. For a moment, something calculating and cold flashed across Cordelia's features before she quickly resumed her mask of deference. That brief glimpse was enough for Mason, who turned to his guards. Escort Lady Blackwood to the carriage. She will return with us to the palace for further questioning. As the guards moved to obey, Cordelia's composed facade crumbled. You don't understand what you're doing, she hissed, her voice suddenly lower, harder. The prophecy cannot be fulfilled. The girl must not take her place as queen. Before anyone could react, Cordelia lunged forward with unexpected speed, a concealed blade flashing in the torchlight as she aimed for Elena's heart. Mason moved faster, intercepting the attack and knocking Cordelia to the ground with controlled force. The blade skittered across the marble floor, coming to rest at Celine's feet. In the shocked silence that followed, Mason pinned Cordelia with a gaze that promised consequences. You have just attempted to assassinate the future queen before witnesses. Your life is forfeit under pack law. Wait, Elena said, stepping forward. Despite everything, this woman had been part of her life for 10 years. I would hear why she hates me so much that she would risk death to prevent my happiness. Mason hesitated, then nodded, respecting Elena's wish. Speak, he commanded Cordelia, and know that lies will only worsen your punishment. Cordelia slowly rose to her knees, dignity reasserting itself even in defeat. You think you are saving her, she said to Mason, her voice steady now. You're condemning her. The curse isn't what you believe. Every queen dies because the moon-silver bond burns too brightly. It consumes them from within. I was protecting her. By locking her in a cellar, by treating her as a servant in her own home, Mason's disbelief was palpable. By keeping her from her destiny, Cordelia replied. Ask your advisor. He knows the truth of the prophecy. All eyes turned to Victor, whose expression had grown grave. The complete prophecy does speak of sacrifice, he admitted reluctantly. But not in the way you suggest, Lady Blackwood. She will die, Cordelia insisted, just as her mother would have had she bonded with the previous king. A cold realization washed over Elena. You knew my mother, before she married my father. Cordelia's silence was confirmation enough. Mason signaled the guards, who moved forward to restrain her more securely. We will continue this discussion at the palace, he declared, under proper interrogation, with the council present. As Cordelia was led away, Elena noticed something small and metallic glinting on the floor where she had fallen. Bending down, she retrieved what appeared to be a pendant that had torn from Cordelia's neck during the struggle. The design made her blood run cold, a red mask emblazoned with a shattered moon. Elena closed her hand around the pendant, deciding to show it to Mason privately. Something told her this small object might explain far more than Cordelia's personal vendetta. Diana was ordered to accompany her mother to the palace, her aloof demeanor cracking slightly to reveal apprehension beneath. Celine, however, approached Elena with hesitant steps. I tried to help, she said quietly. The spare key to the cellar. I left it where I thought you might find it. Elena studied her stepsister's face, searching for deception and finding none. Why would you help me? Celine glanced toward the departing carriage containing her mother and sister. Because not everyone believes the old ways should remain buried. Some of us have been waiting for the moonsilver to return. Before Elena could question her further, Mason returned to her side, his protective presence a tangible force. It's time to leave, he said, offering his arm in a formal gesture that nonetheless felt intensely personal. As they walked toward the royal carriage, Elena cast one last glance at the Blackwood estate, the only home she had ever known. For better or worse, she would never return as the same person who had been locked in that cellar hours ago. The journey to the royal palace passed in a blur of moonlight and whispered revelations. Seated beside Mason in the ornate carriage, Elena finally showed him the pendant she had discovered. The Red Mask Society. Victor identified it immediately, his expression grim. A secret order we believe disbanded after the Red War. They were dedicated to preventing the Moonsilver prophecy from being fulfilled. Why would they oppose a prophecy of peace? Elena asked, turning the pendant over in her hands. Because peace would end their power, Mason explained. The Red War consolidated control in the hands of a few families. The prophecy threatens that arrangement. Elena absorbed this, connecting it with fragments of stories her mother had told her years ago. My mother used to speak of a winter covenant. Could that be related? Victor leaned forward with renewed interest. The Winter Covenant was said to be an agreement between the first Stormheart King and the Moonsilver Alpha after the war, a promise that their bloodlines would someday reunite to heal the rifts between the packs. A promise someone has worked very hard to prevent, Mason added, his hand finding Elena's in the darkness. The pendant seemed to grow heavier in Elena's palm. Cordelia is part of this Red Mask society. She must have married my father to monitor me, perhaps even to prevent this very night. And now she has failed, Mason said with certainty. The bond has formed. The prophecy has begun. Elena looked out the carriage window at the passing landscape, moonlight silvering the forests and fields. What happens now? Mason's eyes met hers, the connection between them pulsing like a living thing. Now we face whatever comes together. The curse, the prophecy, the red masks, none of it will stand against us. His conviction should have seemed premature, even foolish. They had known each other mere hours, yet Elena felt the truth of his words resonating deep within her bones, within the very core of her being. This was right. This was fated. This was only the beginning. As the royal palace appeared on the horizon, its spires reaching toward the star-strewn sky, Elena felt a curious sensation of homecoming. The mark on her wrist hummed with quiet energy, as if recognizing its destination after a long journey. There will be resistance, Victor warned as they approached the palace gates. The council, the nobility, those with vested interests in maintaining the current power structure. They won't accept a Moonsilver Queen without a fight. Then they will fight, Mason stated simply, and they will lose. The carriage passed through elaborate gates and into the palace courtyard, where a welcoming committee already waited, summoned by messengers sent ahead. Elena recognized Governor Hammond among them, his face a careful mask of politeness that didn't quite conceal his displeasure. As a footman opened the carriage door, Mason turned to Elena one last time. "Are you ready?" Elena thought of the cellar, of years spent invisible and unwanted, of her mother's stories and the mark now emblazoned on her wrist, of prophecies and curses in secret societies, of the inexplicable bond that had drawn this powerful man to her side against all odds. "I've been ready my entire life," she answered, and stepped into her destiny. The great hall fell silent as Mason entered with Elena on his arm. The choosing ceremony had devolved into confused speculation in his absence, with rumors spreading like wildfire among the assembled guests. Now all eyes fixed on the unlikely pair, the Alpha King in his formal attire, and the unknown woman in simple clothes, her head held high despite the whispers that followed their progress. "I present to you Elena Blackwood of Granite Hills," Mason announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Daughter of Beta Nathaniel Blackwood and the late heiress Moonsilver, bearer of the Crescent Mark, my chosen mate and your future queen." Governor Hammond stepped forward, indignation barely concealed beneath a veneer of concern. "Your Majesty, while we respect your personal choice, there are protocols to be observed. The council must verify her lineage, her suitability. The law requires that I choose before my 31st year," Mason interrupted. "I have chosen. The moon has blessed our bond. That supersedes all human protocols." To demonstrate, Mason gently raised Elena's wrist, where the crescent mark still glowed with subtle silver light. A collective gasp moved through the crowd as recognition dawned on the older members of the assembly. "Moonsilver," someone whispered, the words spreading through the hall like ripples in still water. "The lost bloodline has returned." Governor Hammond's expression hardened. "Legends and superstitions should not determine the future of our territories, Your Majesty. The girl is clearly of common upbringing, regardless of what mark she bears." "Careful, Governor," Mason warned, a dangerous edge entering his voice. "You approach treason." Victor moved forward, providing a diplomatic buffer between the increasingly hostile parties. "The hour grows late and much has transpired. I suggest we convene the council tomorrow to address all concerns formally. For tonight, let us respect the Alpha's choice and prepare suitable accommodations for the future queen. Hammond clearly wished to object further, but recognized the tactical retreat offered by Victor's suggestion. With a stiff bow, he backed away, though his eyes remained fixed on Elena with undisguised calculation. As the assembly dispersed, Mason led Elena through corridors of increasing grandeur, eventually arriving at the royal wing of the palace. Servants scurried ahead, hastily preparing rooms for their unexpected guest. "These will be your chambers," Mason said, stopping before an ornately carved door. "Until the formal mating ceremony, we must maintain certain traditions." Elena nodded, relieved and somewhat overwhelmed. The events of the night had unfolded with such speed that she had scarcely had time to process them. "When will that be?" she asked. "The full moon is in 7 days," Mason replied. "Traditionally, that would be the time. But given the unusual circumstances, we might consider accelerating the timeline." Elena stepped into her new chambers, momentarily stunned by the luxury surrounding her. The room was larger than the entire attic she had called home for years, with silk draperies, plush carpets, and a bed that could comfortably sleep 5. "This doesn't feel real," she admitted softly. Mason remained at the threshold, respecting the boundary between them, despite the bond that pulled like a physical force. "It will," he promised, "though not all of it will be as pleasant as these rooms. Cordelia's attempt on your life tonight was likely just the first move in a game that has been played for generations." Elena turned back to him, the reality of their situation reasserting itself. "The red masks, the curse, the prophecy. There's so much I don't understand yet." "Tomorrow," Mason said, "abamueto. Tomorrow we'll begin to unravel it all. For tonight, rest. Guards will be posted outside your door. You're safe here." As he turned to leave, Elena called after him, "Mason." It was the first time she had spoken his name without title, and the sound of it seemed to resonate between them. "Thank you for finding me." Mason's expression softened, a glimpse of the man beneath the crown. "I would have torn apart the world stone by stone until I did," he replied simply, and left her to the silence of her new beginning. That night, as Elena finally lay down in a bed softer than anything she had ever experienced, she found sleep elusive despite her exhaustion. The mark on her wrist had faded to a silvery outline, barely visible except in direct light, but the awareness of its significance weighed heavily on her mind. Moon silver, a lost bloodline, a prophecy, a curse. So many pieces of a puzzle she was only beginning to see. Rolling onto her side, Elena caught sight of the moon through her chamber window. Full and bright, it bathed the room in gentle silver light. As she watched, a cloud passed over its face, momentarily casting the chamber into darkness. A shiver ran down Elena's spine as an inexplicable sense of foreboding settled over her. Something told her that the confrontation with Cordelia, dramatic as it had been, was merely the opening move in a far more dangerous game. Forces had been set in motion by tonight's events, ancient powers awakened by the reunion of bloodlines long separated. Tomorrow would bring councils and interrogations, political maneuvering and ancient histories. But for tonight, Elena was content to watch the moon emerge once more from behind the clouds, its light a promise of things hidden soon to be revealed. Miles away in a forgotten temple deep within the Iron Ridge Mountains, 13 figures in red masks gathered around an ancient stone altar. Upon its surface lay a weathered book, open to a page depicting 2 symbols, a crown and a crescent moon, separated by a jagged line. "The prophecy awakens," intoned the central figure. "The bloodlines converge." "But the bond is not yet complete," replied another. "We have 7 days until the full moon ceremony." 7 days to prevent what our ancestors feared most," agreed the leader, placing a hand on the open book. 7 is days to preserve the world as we have shaped it. "And if we fail?" The leader looked up, moonlight reflecting off the red mask. "Then everything ends. The old powers return, and we become obsolete. The Blackwood woman failed us. A minor setback. The pieces are already in motion for our next attempt." One by one, the masked figures placed their hands upon the book, renewing an oath made centuries before, to prevent the prophecy of the Moon Silver Queen at any cost, to maintain the separation of powers that had served them for generations, to preserve the curse that kept the royal bloodline vulnerable and dependent on their counsel. As the last hand joined the circle, the jagged line in the ancient drawing began to bleed, dark liquid seeping from the page as if the book itself were wounded by their touch. A binding oath, sealed in blood, renewed. A promise to destroy what fate itself had set in motion. 7 days until the full moon. 7 days to change destiny. Dawn broke over the royal palace, casting long shadows through Elena's chamber windows. She had slept fitfully, dreams filled with red masks and ancient temples, whispered prophecies and glowing symbols. The previous night felt almost like a dream itself. The cellar, the tunnel, the garden, and then Mason appearing like a figure from legend to claim her as his own. Elena rose from the enormous bed, her body aching from the tensions of the previous day. Approaching the window, she gazed out over the palace grounds stretching before her. Formal gardens gave way to training fields, where royal guards already practiced combat maneuvers. Beyond them lay the city proper, smoke from morning fires creating a hazy ceiling above clustered buildings. And farther still, the mountains where she had been born, raised, and imprisoned until last night. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. A young woman entered carrying fresh clothing and a tray of food. The servant avoided direct eye contact, setting down her burdens with nervous efficiency. "His Majesty requests your presence in the royal library once you're ready, my lady," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been assigned to assist with your preparations." Elena studied the girl, perhaps a year or two younger than herself. "What's your name?" The question seemed to startle the servant. "Lily, please, my lady." "Thank you, Lily. I'm Elena." She smiled, trying to put the girl at ease. "I've never had anyone assist me before. Usually I'm the one doing the assisting." Lily finally looked up, curiosity overcoming her training. "Is it true you're moon silver?" Elena glanced down at her wrist, where the crescent mark remained visible, though no longer glowing. "So they tell me, though I'm still learning what that means." "The older servants have been talking all night," Lily admitted, gaining confidence. "They say your coming was foretold, that you'll end the curse." "What do you know of the curse?" Elena asked, suddenly alert. Lily busied herself laying out the clothing, a simple but elegant dress of deep blue. "Just servants' tales. That every queen died bringing the first royal heir into the world. That the king's bloodline weakens with each generation." She hesitated. "Some say the royal family is being punished for betraying the Moonsilvers during the Red War." Betrayal? This was new information. "I shouldn't speak of such things," Lily backtracked, fear returning to her features. "Please forget I mentioned it, my lady." Elena wanted to press further, but recognized the genuine concern in the girl's eyes. "It's forgotten. Now perhaps you can help me make sense of all these clothes. I'm more accustomed to simple dresses." With Lily's guidance, Elena transformed from the plain stepdaughter of a provincial beta to something closer to a royal consort. The blue dress complemented her dark hair and eyes, while its simple cut maintained an elegance that didn't feel like a costume. A silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon, provided among the clothing, completed the ensemble. "You look beautiful, my lady," Lily said with genuine admiration. "The king will be pleased." Elena studied her reflection in the ornate mirror. The woman staring back seemed like a stranger, confident, poised, worthy of standing beside the Alpha King. "I hope so," she murmured. 2 royal guards escorted Elena through the palace corridors. She felt the stares of servants and nobles alike as she passed, heard the whispers that followed in her wake. The Moonsilver girl, the curse breaker, the common wolf who would be queen. The royal library occupied an entire wing of the palace's eastern side. Massive windows allowed morning light to illuminate thousands of volumes arranged on shelves that reached to the vaulted ceiling. At the center of this temple of knowledge, Mason stood with Victor beside a large table covered with ancient texts and unrolled scrolls. Mason looked up as Elena entered, and the intensity of his gaze made her heart quicken. In daylight, she could appreciate details missed in the moonlit garden. The silver threading his dark hair at the temples, the fine lines around his eyes suggesting both laughter and concern. The powerful breadth of his shoulders beneath his formal attire. "Elena," he said simply, extending his hand. She crossed the room to take it, and once again that sense of rightness, of completion, flowed between them at the contact. "Your Majesty." "Mason," he corrected gently, When we're alone or with trusted advisors, I'm simply Mason to you. Victor cleared his throat. We've been researching the Moonsilver bloodlines since before sunrise, he explained, attempting to separate truth from legend. Elinal examined the materials spread across the table. Many were in languages she couldn't identify, with illustrations depicting wolves, moons, and ancient battles. Have you found anything useful? Fragments, Mason replied. The official histories were purged after the Red War, but Victor has unearthed some private journals and forbidden texts that escaped destruction. The most complete account comes from Queen Eleanor's personal diary, Victor said, indicating a small leather-bound book. She was the last Stormheart queen to survive childbirth, over 2 centuries ago. She writes of a pact broken, a bloodline scattered, and a curse laid upon the royal line as punishment. Elena carefully opened the fragile diary. The handwriting inside was elegant but hurried, as if the writer feared discovery. Can you tell me what happened in the Red War? I've heard it mentioned several times now, but my education was limited. Victor and Mason exchanged glances. The official history calls it a territorial dispute, Mason began. A bloody conflict between the Northern and Eastern alliances that lasted 3 years and ended with the Stormheart line assuming control of all 7 territories. And the unofficial history? Elena pressed. Victor sighed heavily. According to these sources, it was a systematic purge of the Moonsilver Wolves, orchestrated by a coalition that became the Red Mask Society. The Moonsilvers possessed abilities that threatened the established order, empathic gifts, healing powers, the ability to form bonds across pack lines. Your ancestor, King Alaric Stormheart, initially opposed the purge, Mason continued. The Moonsilvers had been allies of the crown for generations, but after his first mate died mysteriously, he changed his position. He betrayed them, Elena surmised, remembering Lily's words. He withdrew royal protection, Victor corrected diplomatically, allowed the hunting parties to cross Stormheart lands. Many Moonsilvers died. Others fled or went into hiding, abandoning their pack identities and intermarrying with common wolves. Elena looked down at her wrist. My mother never spoke of this history. She told me stories about our ancestors, but nothing about persecution or special abilities. She was protecting you, Bayam, Mason said gently. The fewer who knew of your heritage, the safer you would remain. Until now, Elena noted. Until now, Mason agreed. Your emergence changes everything. The Red Masks will see you as the fulfillment of their greatest fear. The prophecy that a Moonsilver Queen will unite with the Stormheart King to break the curse and restore balance to the territories. Elena closed Queen Eleanor's diary carefully. You speak of abilities, empathy, healing. Do you believe I possess such powers? The mark has appeared, Victor said. That alone confirms your bloodline. As for abilities, they typically develop fully after the mating bond is complete. A knock at the library door interrupted their discussion. Captain Rowan of the Royal Guard entered and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, the Council has convened as requested. They await your presence in the Great Chamber. Mason nodded. Inform them we'll arrive shortly. When the captain had left, Mason turned to Elena. Are you ready to face the Council? They won't make this easy. Elena smoothed her dress, squaring her shoulders. I've spent my life being overlooked and underestimated. Perhaps that's prepared me better than any royal education could have. Perhaps it has. Mason agreed with the first genuine smile she had seen from him. Victor will accompany us. Remember, regardless of what's said in that chamber, you are my chosen mate. Nothing can change that. The great chamber lived up to its name, with soaring ceilings supported by massive columns carved to resemble ancient wolves. 12 council members sat at a curved table facing a raised platform with 2 ornate chairs, one occupied by Mason, the other now filled by Elena. Victor stood to one side, his presence a silent support. Governor Hammond occupied the central position at the council table, his aristocratic features set in an expression of grave concern. To his right sat an elderly woman Elena would later learn was Lady Victoria, keeper of royal records. To his left, a broad-shouldered man with military bearing, General Blackthorne, commander of the territorial forces. Members of the council, Mason began formally. I present Elena Moonshadow, daughter of Nathaniel and Iris Blackwood of Granite Hills territory, bearer of the moon silver mark and my chosen mate. Hammond rose immediately. Your Majesty, while we respect your personal preferences, there are serious concerns regarding this unprecedented selection. State them plainly, Mason commanded. First, the lady's background. No offense intended, Miss Blackwood, but a queen requires education in diplomacy, territory law, pact protocols, all of which can be taught, Victor interjected. Hammond continued as if he hadn't spoken. Second, her lineage. These claims of moon silver blood rely on legends and superstitions, not documented pack records. The mark on her wrist is documentation enough, Mason countered. A curious birthmark, nothing more, Hammond dismissed. And finally, the timing. Your Majesty selected this woman outside the formal choosing ceremony, without council oversight or proper verification. Mason leaned forward, his patience visibly thinning. The mate bond doesn't conform to human schedules or protocols, Governor. When it forms, it forms. The ceremony is tradition, not law. Lady Victoria cleared her throat. If I may, Your Majesty, there is precedent for mate selection outside the ceremony. King Alaric himself chose Queen Eleanora during a hunting expedition, if the records are accurate. The records from that era are notoriously unreliable, Hammond argued. Elena had remained silent, observing the political currents flowing through the room. Now she spoke, her voice clear and steady. Governor Hammond, you seem particularly concerned about my moon silver heritage. Why is that? The direct question caught Hammond off guard. His composed facade slipped momentarily before he recovered. Merely historical accuracy, my dear. These old legends tend to inspire unnecessary mysticism. Yet you recognized the mark immediately last night, Elena noted. For something relegated to legend, you seem quite familiar with its significance. A tense silence followed her observation. Hammond's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. My family maintains extensive historical records. Academic interest only. Mason's slight nod conveyed his approval of Elena's astute challenge. The council's concerns are noted, he stated formally. However, my decision stands. Elena Moonshadow will be my mate and your queen. The ceremony will take place on the full moon, 6 days from now. In the meantime, she will receive all necessary instruction in royal protocols. General Blackthorne spoke for the first time, his voice deep and graveled. And what of the attempted assassination, Your Majesty? The Blackwood woman's actions suggest organized opposition. Cordelia Blackwood remains in custody, Mason confirmed. Initial interrogation reveals connections to fringe elements that oppose the royal line. We're investigating further. Fringe elements? Hammond questioned skeptically. Surely not the mythical Red Mask Society, another legend best left to children's stories. Elena's hand unconsciously moved to her pocket where she had placed the red mask pendant discovered at the confrontation. Mason noticed the gesture but didn't acknowledge it. We follow all credible leads, Governor, he stated neutrally. Now, if there are no further objections, this session is concluded. Lady Victoria, please arrange suitable instructors for the future Queen's education. General Blackthorne, I request increased security throughout the palace until after the ceremony. The council members rose as Mason stood, officially ending the meeting. As they filed from the chamber, Elena noticed the significant glances exchanged between Hammond and several other members. Alliances were being formed, opposition organizing. That went as expected, Victor commented once they were alone again. Hammond will continue to undermine your legitimacy, Elena. He's been positioning his own candidates for the Queen's role for years. He knows more than he's admitting, Elena said, about the moon silvers, about the red masks. I could feel it. Mason looked at her with renewed interest. Feel it? Elena struggled to articulate the sensation. His words said one thing, but underneath, there was something else. Fear, perhaps, or anger. Victor exchanged a meaningful look with Mason. Empathic sensitivity, the first of the moon silver gifts to manifest. Then it's beginning, Mason said softly. The prophecy unfolds. The days that followed established a grueling routine. Mornings found Elena with Lady Victoria in a rotation of instructors, drilling her in royal etiquette, territorial politics, in the complex web of pack alliances. Afternoons were devoted to Mason and the mate bond, carefully supervised sessions designed to strengthen their connection without completing it before the ceremony. Evenings Elena spent in the Royal Library with Victor, poring over the fragments of moon-silver history they continued to uncover. The more she learned, the more she understood why her bloodline had been targeted for extinction. They could sense lies, Victor explained one night, reading from a crumbling manuscript. Form bonds across pack lines. Some even demonstrated healing abilities powerful enough to cure conditions other wolves couldn't survive. Abilities that would threaten those in power, Elena surmised. Precisely. A ruler cannot manipulate those who sense his true intentions, cannot maintain arbitrary borders between packs if bonds form naturally across them. Elena studied an illustration showing a female wolf with a crescent moon mark healing an injured alpha. Do you believe I'll develop all these abilities? The strongest emerge after the mating ceremony, Victor replied. But you're already showing signs of empathic awareness. Your sensitivity to Hammond's deception, for instance. It's still vague, Elena admitted. Impressions rather than clear readings. It will strengthen, Victor assured her, though you should be cautious. Many will see your abilities as a threat, just as they did centuries ago. On her fourth night in the palace, Elena woke to the sensation of being watched. The room was dark except for moonlight filtering through the curtains. She lay perfectly still, listening, sensing a presence that shouldn't be there. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness beside her wardrobe. Elena prepared to scream for the guards stationed outside when the intruder stepped into a shaft of moonlight, revealing familiar features. "Celine?" Elena whispered incredulously. Her stepsister raised a finger to her lips. "Not so loud. The guards think I'm your new lady's maid, arriving early. But we don't have much time." Elena sat up, pulling the bed covers around herself. "How did you get into the palace?" "The Red Masks have allies everywhere," Celine replied. "I came to warn you. Mother has been released." "Released? How?" Governor Hammond intervened, claimed jurisdiction as her territory's representative. She's under house arrest at Hammond's estate, not in the royal prison. Elena processed this troubling information. "Why are you telling me this? Why help me at all?" Celine sat cautiously on the edge of the bed. In the moonlight, Elena noticed for the first time how little her stepsister resembled Cordelia. Where her mother was all sharp angles and cold calculation, Celine had a softer presence. "Because I'm not what you think," Celine said quietly. "I'm not Cordelia's daughter by birth. My real mother was a servant in the Hammond household, a moon-silver descendant who died soon after I was born. Cordelia adopted me to monitor me, to ensure I never developed the abilities." Elena stared in shock. "You're moon-silver too?" "Distant relation, not pure enough for the mark to manifest, but enough that Cordelia feared what I might become." Celine pushed up her sleeve, revealing a faint, incomplete crescent pattern barely visible on her inner wrist. "This appeared the night you bonded with the king. It's why I had to come warn you. We're connected now." "Does Diana know about your heritage?" "No, she's Cordelia's true daughter in every way. She's being groomed to replace you if they succeed in—" Celine couldn't finish the sentence. "In killing me," Elena completed bluntly, "like they tried to kill every Moonsilver Queen before me." Celine nodded grimly. "The assassination attempt will come before the full moon ceremony. Hammond doesn't know I'm here. He believes I'm fully loyal to their cause." Elena studied her stepsister carefully, extending her developing empathic senses. She detected no deception, only genuine concern tinged with fear. "You're risking everything to warn me. Because you're the one the prophecy spoke of, the true queen who will heal the territories." Celine rose, moving back toward the shadows. "I should go before I'm missed. Trust no one who isn't personally vetted by the king himself. The Red Masks have infiltrated every level of the palace." "Wait," Elena called softly. "Thank you, Celine." Her stepsister paused at the window she had apparently used to enter. "We're family, Elena. Not the family forced upon us, but something older. Truer." With those words, she disappeared into the night. Elena immediately summoned the guards, requesting Mason's presence regardless of the hour. Within minutes, the king arrived in her chambers, concern evident on his features. "What's happened?" he demanded, dismissing the guards to give them privacy. Elena related Celine's unexpected visit and warnings. Mason listened intently, his expression darkening as she described Cordelia's release and the planned assassination attempt. Hammond oversteps, he growled, claiming jurisdiction was technically within his rights as territory governor. But to do so without informing me, he's making his move, Elena said, testing how far he can push against your authority. Mason paced the room, his natural dominance radiating from him in waves that Elena could now sense clearly. We'll increase your security detail, change your routines daily, trust no food or drink not tested first. And Celine, she's risked everything to warn us. If what she says is true about her heritage, she's in as much danger as you are. Mason stopped pacing. Decision made. I'll send trusted guards to bring her here, officially as your lady's maid as she suggested. She'll be safer within the palace under our direct protection. Elena nodded, relieved. There's more, Mason. Something I've been researching with Victor, but haven't mentioned yet. She retrieved a small book from her nightstand. I found references to a hidden chamber beneath the old temple in the North Woods. It supposedly contains the complete Winter Covenant, the original agreement between our bloodlines. Mason took the book, examining the passage she indicated. This could provide the answers we've been seeking. The full text of the prophecy, the nature of the curse, the true history of the Red War. We need to find it, Elena insisted, before the ceremony, before Hammond makes his move. Mason closed the book, his decision made. I'll arrange an expedition tomorrow. Small, discreet, you, me, Victor, and a minimal guard detail. He hesitated, then added, Elena, if Hammond has indeed allied with the Red Masks openly, we're facing more than political maneuvering. This could become civil war. The gravity of the situation settled over them both. What had begun as a fairy tale the hidden princess discovered and claimed by her king was rapidly evolving into something far more complex and dangerous. Not just their lives, but the future of all 7 territories hung in the balance. Then we'd better make sure we win, Elena said with quiet determination. Morning found them riding north, a small party comprising Elena, Mason, Victor, and 4 elite royal guards. They had departed before dawn, using a lesser-known exit to avoid notice. Elena wore practical riding clothes rather than the formal dresses of recent days, her dark hair braided simply down her back. The mark on her wrist seemed to pulse faintly as they approached the ancient forest that marked the boundary between civilized territories and the wild lands beyond. The temple was abandoned centuries ago, Victor explained as they rode. After the Red War, it was declared forbidden ground. Most have forgotten it ever existed. Yet the Red Masks still use it, Mason noted, according to Elena's vision last night. After Celine's departure, Elena had experienced her first true moonsilver vision, vivid images of 13 masked figures gathered around an altar, performing some dark ritual involving blood and ancient texts. She had seen enough details of the temple's location to guide their expedition. If the complete Winter Covenant exists, Victor continued, it would explain why they continue to use the site. They would want to control access to the original agreement. They rode in silence after that, each contemplating what they might discover. The forest grew denser around them, ancient trees blocking much of the sunlight. No paths existed here, but Elena felt drawn forward by an invisible thread, her mark warming slightly as they progressed. There, she said suddenly, pointing to a barely visible stone arch half buried in vegetation. That's the entrance I saw in the vision. They dismounted, securing their horses to nearby trees. Mason instructed 2 guards to remain with the animals while the rest proceeded on foot. The temple entrance had once been grand, with carved pillars depicting wolves and moons, now crumbling and covered with moss. Beyond the arch, stone steps descended into darkness. Stay close to me, Mason told Elena, producing torches which he lit with practiced efficiency. The descent seemed endless, the air growing cooler and heavier with each step. Elena's mark burned steadily now, reacting to something deep below. Finally, the stairs ended at a large circular chamber supported by massive columns. At the center stood a stone altar, exactly as Elena had seen in her vision. It's been used recently, Victor observed, examining the altar where dark stains suggested the blood ritual Elena had witnessed. Mason approached a far wall where faded murals depicted scenes from what must have been the Red War. Wolves fighting, fleeing, dying. One image showed a Stormheart king turning away as moon-silver wolves were pursued by red-masked hunters. The betrayal, he said softly, touching the mural with something like shame. My ancestors' greatest failure. Elena was drawn to the opposite wall where a single female wolf stood beneath a full moon, her raised wrist showing the crescent mark. Around her, injured wolves of different packs were healing, their wounds closing under her touch. The unifier barrier, Victor breathed, joining her. The prophecy speaks of her return when the bloodlines rejoin. I'm no healer, Elena said uncertainly. I can sense emotions, sometimes intentions, but I've shown no ability to heal. Not yet, Victor replied. The full power comes with the completed bond. They continued exploring the chamber, finding niches containing decayed scrolls and ceremonial objects. It was Mason who discovered the hidden panel behind the altar, triggered by pressing on a carved crescent moon. The panel slid aside with a grating of stone on stone, revealing a smaller chamber beyond. Inside, a pedestal held a single item, a leather-bound book sealed with silver clasps shaped like crescent moons. The Covenant, Victor whispered reverently. Elena approached the pedestal, her mark now glowing brightly in the torchlight. As she reached for the book, the silver clasps sprang open at her touch. The ancient pages inside were covered with text in a language none of them recognized, except Elena, who found she could read it as naturally as her native tongue. It's the old language, she said wonderingly, the wolf tongue from before human words. You can understand it? Mason asked, amazed. Elena nodded, carefully turning the fragile pages. The covenant wasn't just an agreement between kings. It was a pact between the moon goddess herself and both our bloodlines. The storm hearts to protect and rule justly, the moon silvers to heal and unite. She continued reading, her expression growing grave. When King Alaric betrayed his oath and allowed the moon silvers to be hunted, the goddess laid the curse upon his line. No Stormheart king would know the joy of family until a moon silver queen returned to forgive the betrayal and renew the pact. The curse can be broken, Mason said, hope evident in his voice. Yes, Elena confirmed, but at a price, Behan. She looked up from the book, meeting Mason's eyes directly. When the bond completes during the full moon ceremony, I must choose whether to forgive the original betrayal. If I do, the curse breaks, but my healing abilities will be temporarily channeled into breaking the curse rather than developing normally. And if you don't forgive? Victor asked cautiously. Elena turned back to the text. Then the curse remains, and I retain all moon silver abilities at their full strength. But, she hesitated, reading further. But our first child would still be claimed by the curse. Mason placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. This is no choice at all. The curse must end, regardless of what abilities you might temporarily sacrifice. There's more, Elena continued reading. The red masks are bound to the curse as well. They draw power from it, from the imbalance it creates. If the curse ends, so does their influence. Which explains their determination to prevent our union, Mason concluded. Everything they've built over centuries would collapse. A sudden noise from the outer chamber alerted them to danger. One of their guards appeared at the hidden doorway, blood streaming from a wound at his temple. Ambush, Your Majesty, he gasped. Hammond's men. They followed us. Mason immediately moved to defensive position, drawing the sword he wore at his side. Victor, stay with Elena. Complete your reading of the Covenant. We need all the information it contains. The wounded guard staggered aside as Mason rushed past him into the main chamber, where sounds of combat echoed off ancient walls. Elena turned back to the book with renewed urgency, scanning the remaining pages for crucial information. Here, she said to Victor, the final prophecy. When the bloodlines reunite and the curse breaks, all pack boundaries dissolve. All wolves become one pack again, as in the beginning times. Victor's eyes widened. That would end the entire power structure, the territory system, the council, everything. One pack, Elena repeated, under the true alpha pair. A cry of pain from the outer chamber spurred Elena to action. She closed the book, securing it inside her riding jacket. We need to help them. Your safety is paramount, Victor objected. If you fall, everything falls with you. And if Mason falls, what then? Elena countered. I won't hide while he fights for both our lives. Before Victor could stop her, Elena rushed toward the sounds of battle. The scene in the main chamber was chaos. Mason and his remaining guards surrounded by Hammond's men, at least a dozen strong. Two royal guards already lay motionless on the stone floor. Mason fought with the skill of a true alpha, his movements fluid and deadly. But he was outnumbered, and even as Elena watched, a Hammond soldier slipped behind him, blade raised. Mason! She cried in warning. The king turned in time to parry the blow, but the distraction cost him. Another attacker struck from the side, his blade finding purchase in Mason's arm. Blood bloomed across the king's sleeve as he stumbled back. Something snapped inside Elena at the sight. The mark on her wrist flared with blinding intensity, and with it came a surge of power unlike anything she had experienced before. Acting on instinct, she raised her marked arm toward the attackers. A wave of silver energy pulsed outward from her hand, engulfing Hammond's men. They froze in place, weapons dropping from suddenly nerveless fingers. One by one they collapsed to the ground, unconscious but alive. Mason stared at Elena in astonishment as she lowered her arm, the silver glow fading. What did you do to them? I don't know, she admitted, equally shocked. I just felt something unlock inside me when you were wounded. Victor emerged from the hidden chamber, surveying the scene with amazement. The moon-silver power awakens early, he observed, triggered by threat to the mate bond. Lena rushed to Mason's side, examining his injured arm. The cut was deep, bleeding freely. Without conscious thought, she placed her marked wrist over the wound. Again, silver light emanated from the crescent symbol, and beneath her touch, Mason's flesh began to knit together. When she removed her hand, the wound had closed completely, leaving only a faint silver line to mark its existence. The healing gift, Victor whispered reverently, manifesting before the completed bond. Unprecedented. Mason flexed his healed arm experimentally, wonder in his eyes. Elena, what you just did was instinct, she finished. Nothing I controlled or understood. The momentary triumph faded as they assessed their situation. Two loyal guards dead, Hammond's men temporarily incapacitated, but clear evidence that their expedition had been betrayed. Someone close to the throne had informed the governor of their plans. We need to return to the palace immediately, Mason decided. Hammond has shown his hand openly now. This was an assassination attempt on royal soil, an act of treason beyond dispute. They collected the Covenant book and what remained of their party, leaving Hammond's unconscious men where they lay. The return journey was tense and swift. Elena riding close to Mason, both hyper-aware of potential threats from every shadow. As the palace came into view, Elena sensed Mason's growing anger, not just at Hammond's betrayal, but at whoever within his inner circle had revealed their expedition. There's a traitor among your trusted advisors, she said quietly. Yes, Mason agreed grimly, and when we find them, they'll answer to pack law. They entered the palace through the same discreet entrance they had used that morning, hoping to maintain the element of surprise. Victor departed immediately to summon loyal council members, while Mason led Elena toward the royal chambers. You should rest, he told her. The power you exhibited in the temple, it must have drained you. Elena shook her head. I feel stronger, not weaker, as if something that was sleeping has finally awakened. Mason studied her with renewed wonder. The prophecy unfolds faster than anyone anticipated. Hammond will be desperate now. As they turned a corner, they encountered Celine hurrying toward them. Her eyes widened at their battle-worn appearance. Thank the moon goddess you've returned, she exclaimed. Hammond has called an emergency council session in your absence. He's claiming you've abdicated your responsibilities by leaving the palace secretly. Convenient timing, Mason observed darkly. Did he mention that he sent assassins to ensure we wouldn't return at all? Celine's shock appeared genuine. Assassins? He told the council you had fled with Elena to avoid the curse, abandoning your duty to the Pax. Mason's expression hardened. Then it's time we correct the record. Have the royal guards assemble in the Great Hall. All of them. As Celine hurried to obey, Mason turned to Elena. Are you ready to confront the council? To reveal what we've discovered? Elena touched the book secured inside her jacket. The truth has been hidden too long. It's time the territories knew what really happened during the Red War and what their future holds when the curse breaks. Mason took her hand, his thumb brushing over the crescent mark. Whatever comes, we face it together. My queen. The title, spoken with such certainty, sent a shiver of recognition through Elena. Not from ambition or pride, but from a deeper knowing that this was her rightful place, her destined role. The forgotten stepdaughter had found her true inheritance at last. Together they walked toward the Great Hall, toward confrontation and revelation, toward the fulfillment of a prophecy centuries in the making. The bond between them pulsed with shared purpose, growing stronger with each step. Hammond's face drained of color when Mason and Elena entered the Great Hall in the midst of his speech to the assembled council. The governor faltered mid-sentence, his carefully constructed narrative of royal abandonment collapsing at the sight of the very pair he had claimed had fled. Your Majesty, Hammond recovered quickly, offering a stiff bow. We had received reports of your departure without royal guard or notification. The council was naturally concerned. Concerned enough to send armed men to ensure we never returned? Mason's voice carried throughout the hall, silencing the murmurs that had erupted at their entrance. Concerned enough to attempt assassination of your king and his chosen mate? Gasps and exclamations broke out among the council members. Hammond's expression hardened, his pretense of loyalty crumbling under Mason's direct accusation. Baseless allegations, he declared. If your Majesty encountered resistance during your unauthorized expedition, perhaps it was from those protecting sacred sites from desecration. Elena stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. Sacred sites like the temple where the red masks perform their blood rituals, where they draw power from a curse that they helped would create. Hammond's eyes narrowed at her words. Something calculated and cold emerged in his demeanor as he realized the extent of what they had discovered. You speak of legends and superstitions, my dear. Hardly the basis for territorial governance. We speak of this, Elena replied, producing the covenant book from her jacket. The silver clasps gleamed in the hall's light, causing several older council members to inhale sharply in recognition. Lady Victoria rose slowly from her seat. The Winter Covenant, she breathed. It still exists, and reveals the truth Hammond and his red masked brothers have concealed for centuries, Mason stated. The curse on my bloodline was no accident of fate. It was punishment for betraying the Moonsilvers during the Red War, a betrayal orchestrated by the same secret society that Governor Hammond leads today. Hammond laughed, the sound hollow and forced. Secret societies? Ancient curses? Your Majesty has clearly fallen under the spell of this common girl and her fabricated heritage. My heritage is no fabrication, Elena replied calmly, raising her wrist where the crescent mark now glowed visibly. Nor are my abilities. Without warning, Elena focused her newly awakened power, directing it solely at Hammond. Silver light enveloped him briefly, and when it faded, a small red mask pendant identical to Cordelia's hung revealed outside his formal jacket. The mark of your true allegiance, Governor, Elena announced it. Hidden until now. Hammond clutched at the pendant, his facade finally crumbling completely. You understand nothing, he snarled, all pretense abandoned. The old ways would destroy everything we've built. Pack boundaries, territory governance, the council itself, all would dissolve if the prophecy fulfills. Because all wolves would be one pack again, Mason finished, as was intended from the beginning. Hammond looked around wildly, seeking allies among the stunned council members. Finding none willing to openly stand with him, he made a desperate play. Guards, he shouted. Seize the false queen. She bewitches your king with moonsilver sorcery. The royal guards stationed around the hall didn't move, their loyalty to Mason unwavering. Hammond's expression contorted with fury as he realized his miscalculation. This isn't over, he hissed. The ceremony is still 2 days away. The bond incomplete. The red masks have stood guard against the prophecy for centuries. We won't fail now. With unexpected speed, Hammond threw something to the ground. Smoke billowed forth, filling the hall with choking clouds. By the time it cleared, the governor had vanished, along with several council members who had apparently chosen his side in this final confrontation. Find them, Mason ordered the guards. Hammond is to be arrested for treason against the crown. Any who aid him share his fate. As the guards dispersed to search the palace, Mason turned to the remaining council members, his authority absolute. The truth has been revealed today. The curse that has plagued the Stormheart line for centuries will end when Elena and I complete our bond during the full moon ceremony. The territories will begin a transition to the old way. One pack united under the true alpha pair. Murmurs broke out among the council members, some fearful, others cautiously hopeful. Lady Victoria again rose to speak. Your Majesty, while I believe what you've discovered, such fundamental changes to our governance cannot happen overnight. The territories have operated independently for generations. The transition will be gradual, Mason assured them, but it begins now with the truth. No more secrets, no more curses, no more red masks manipulating from the shadows. As the council session dissolved into urgent discussions, Mason led Elena from the hall. Victor joined them in a small antechamber, his expression grave. Hammond's escape complicates everything, the old advisor said. He'll regroup with the remaining red masks. Their next attack will be even more desperate. We've exposed them publicly, Mason pointed out. They've lost their power of secrecy, which makes them more dangerous, not less, Elena cautioned. Hammond knows he can't win through political maneuvering anymore. He'll resort to direct action. We'll move the ceremony forward, Mason decided. Tomorrow night instead of waiting for the full moon. The moon is nearly full already. It should be sufficient. Victor looked troubled. Accelerating the timeline carries risks. The bond might not develop its full strength without the complete full moon energy. It's a risk we must take, Mason insisted. Every hour gives Hammond more time to organize his remaining forces. Elena nodded her agreement. Tomorrow night, then. But we should continue as if the original schedule remains. Let Hammond believe he has more time to plan. A wise precaution, Victor acknowledged. I'll make the actual preparations in secret, with only our most trusted circle informed of the change. As they finalized the details, a royal guard entered with urgent news. Your Majesty, Lady Cordelia Blackwood has been found dead at Governor Hammond's estate. Initial evidence suggests poison. Elena received this news with mixed emotions. Cordelia had been cruel and manipulative, had even attempted to kill her, yet had also been part of her life for a decade. Hammond ties up loose ends, Mason observed grimly. And Diana? Elena asked, suddenly concerned for her other stepsister, despite their difficult history. Has she been found? No, my lady. She appears to have fled with the governor. This confirmation of Diana's allegiance was unsurprising, but still disappointing. Elena thought of the two stepsisters who had shared her home for 10 years. One now revealed as a secret ally, the other an enemy committed to the Red Mask cause. Increase security around Celine, Mason instructed. If Hammond has eliminated Cordelia, he may target her next as another loose end. The guard departed to carry out this order, leaving the three of them to contemplate the rapidly escalating situation. What had begun as a fairy tale, the common girl claimed by the king, had transformed into open conflict, with the future of all 7 territories hanging in the balance. Get some rest, Mason told Elena gently. Tomorrow will test us both beyond anything we've yet faced. Elena nodded, suddenly aware of the exhaustion beneath her newfound strength, the awakening of her abilities, the confrontation with Hammond, the revelations in the council chamber. All had taken their toll. As she turned to leave, Mason caught her hand, raising it to his lips. The gesture was both formal and intensely intimate, a promise of what tomorrow would bring when their bond finally completed. Until tomorrow, my queen, he murmured against her skin. Until tomorrow, Elena echoed, her voice steady despite the flutter of her heart. She departed for her chambers, royal guards now doubled at every approach. In less than 24 hours, she would formally become queen of the 7 territories. The curse would break. The prophecy would fulfill. The territories would begin their transformation back to the original pack, if they survived what Hammond had planned. That night, Elena dreamed of 13 red masks floating in darkness, surrounding a stone altar stained with blood. One by one, the masks crumbled to dust, revealing the faces beneath. Some she recognized, others unknown. Last to crumble was Hammond's mask, but unlike the others, his face transformed into something inhuman, a twisted manifestation of rage and thwarted ambition. The bond may break the curse, his distorted voice echoed, but some prices are too high to pay. She woke with the first light of dawn, the dream's warning lingering. Something Hammond had said in the council chamber nagged at her consciousness. Some hint she had missed about their final plan. Elena dressed quickly, determined to find Mason and share her concerns. The palace hummed with subdued activity as servants prepared for what they believed was merely a rehearsal for the following night's ceremony. Only those closest to the throne knew the truth, that tonight would bring either the culmination of the prophecy or its final defeat. Elena found Mason in the royal strategy room with Victor and General Blackthorne, reviewing security arrangements for the ceremony. The king looked up as she entered, his face lighting with the private smile he reserved only for her. "Something troubles you," he observed immediately, attuned to her emotions through their strengthening bond. "A dream," Elena explained, describing the vision of crumbling masks and Hammond's final warning. "I believe they're planning something specific for the ceremony itself, something beyond a simple assassination attempt." General Blackthorne nodded grimly. "My scouts report unusual movement in the hills east of the city, small groups gathering, all moving toward the palace district." "Hammond gathers his forces," Mason concluded. "Not just red masks now, but anyone who fears the changes the broken curse will bring." "We've doubled the palace guard and secured all known entrances," Blackthorne continued. "But if they have infiltrators already inside—" "They do," Elena said with certainty. "The red masks have had centuries to place their people in positions throughout the palace hierarchy." Mason's expression hardened. "Then we eliminate the advantage of surprise. We announce the change ceremony time openly this morning. Let them scramble to adjust their plans." "A bold move," Victor commented, "but it might flush out any remaining traitors within our inner circle." "Have the Royal Herald make the announcement immediately," Mason instructed. "The ceremony will take place at moonrise tonight rather than tomorrow. Cite an astrological advantage, or some such reason." As General Blackthorne left to carry out this order, Elena moved to the large windows overlooking the palace grounds. Beyond them lay the city, and beyond that, the 7 territories that would soon transform under their leadership. If they survived the night. "I should be able to sense any red masks near us during the ceremony," she said. "My abilities grow stronger by the hour." "Don't overextend yourself," Mason cautioned, joining her at the window. "Your primary focus must be completing the bond. Everything else depends on that." Elena turned to him, studying the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time. Silver-streaked, dark hair. Eyes that held both authority and unexpected gentleness. The strong line of his jaw now tense with the weight of their shared destiny. "6 days ago, I was locked in a cellar while my stepsisters attended your choosing ceremony," she marveled softly. "Now we stand on the precipice of changing the world." Mason took her hand, his thumb brushing over the crescent mark that had brought them together. "Not changing it," he corrected, "restoring it to what it was always meant to be." Outside, the Royal Herald's voice rang out across the palace grounds, announcing the accelerated ceremony schedule. The final pieces were in motion. By nightfall, the centuries-old struggle between Stormheart and Moonsilver, between curse and prophecy, between division and unity, would reach its conclusion. For better or worse, destiny awaited them both when the moon rose. Moonlight spilled across the ceremonial chamber, bathing ancient stone in silver radiance. Royal attendants moved with practiced efficiency, arranging ritual objects on the altar that had stood in the palace's sacred heart for over 500 years. Every Stormheart king since the Red War had been mated in this hallowed space, each ceremony overshadowed by the curse that inevitably claimed their chosen queens. Tonight would end differently. Tonight, the curse would break. Elena stood in her preparation chamber, arms outstretched, as Celine and 2 trusted handmaidens adorned her in the traditional raiment of a royal mate. The gown was deceptively simple, flowing silk the color of moonlight, embroidered with silver thread forming intricate patterns of wolves and crescent moons. Around her throat, they fastened a delicate silver pendant bearing the Stormheart crest intertwined with a crescent moon, a new design Mason had commissioned to symbolize their united bloodlines. "You look every inch a queen," Celine said softly, stepping back to admire her handiwork. In the days since her revelation of shared Moonsilver heritage, Celine had become Elena's most trusted ally, providing insights into Red Mask methods and palace protocols alike. A queen without a kingdom yet, Elena replied, touching the crescent mark on her wrist. It pulsed with steady silver light, responding to the nearness of the ceremony. Not until the bond completes and the curse breaks. Celine's expression grew serious. Hammond and his followers will try to prevent that at any cost. The moment the ceremony begins, we're at our most vulnerable. Which is why we've taken every precaution, Elena reminded her. Royal guards lined every corridor leading to the ceremonial chamber. General Blackthorn's most trusted lieutenants personally verified the identity of each attendee. Even the ceremonial objects had been checked for tampering. Yet something still troubled Elena, the same unease that had woken her from dreams of crumbling masks, something they had missed. Something Hammond had planned that defied conventional threat. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Victor entered, resplendent in formal attire befitting his position as the king's most trusted advisor. Age seemed to have fallen away from him in recent days, replaced by the energy of witnessing history's pivot point. "It's time, my lady," he announced, offering a respectful bow. "The moon approaches its zenith." Elena took a steadying breath, preparing for the moment she would enter the ceremonial chamber and bind her fate irrevocably to Masons, to the territories, to the prophecy itself. "I'm ready," she declared, with more confidence than she truly felt. Victor offered his arm, the gesture both formal and paternal. In less than a week, this man had become the father figure her own father had failed to be. "Then let us proceed. Your king awaits." Celine and the handmaidens took their positions behind Elena, forming a small procession. As they exited the preparation chamber, royal guards fell into step alongside them, alert for any threat to the future queen. The palace corridors lay hushed and expectant, the usual buzz of activity suspended for this momentous occasion. Mason waited at the entrance to the ceremonial chamber, magnificent in formal regalia that emphasized his powerful frame without ostentation. Silver embroidery matching Elena's gown adorned his deep blue tunic, the colors of night and moonlight united. When his eyes found hers, Elena felt the mate bond pulse between them, strengthening with each step that brought them closer together. "You are breathtaking," Mason said simply when she reached him, his voice carrying emotions words couldn't fully express. "As are you," she replied, accepting his outstretched hand. Together they turned toward the ceremonial chamber where the highest-ranking members of all 7 territories waited to witness history's unmaking and remaking. The massive doors swung open, and the assembled dignitaries rose as one. Music swelled from unseen musicians, an ancient melody said to have been played at the very first mating ceremony between wolves, before territories divided them. Elena and Mason walked the length of the chamber in perfect synchronicity, their steps matching as if they had practiced for months rather than days. The bond between them guided their movements, another sign of its growing strength. Victor followed several paces behind, carrying the Winter Covenant book that would play a central role in the ceremony. At the altar, Lady Victoria waited to perform her ancestral duty as keeper of ceremonies. Age had bent her frame but not her dignity as she raised her hands for silence. When the chamber grew still, she began the ritual words that had remained unchanged for centuries. "Under moon's witness, before pack and territory, 2 souls come to unite as one," she intoned. "Alpha and mate, king and queen, bound by destiny's thread." As she spoke, Elena scanned the assembled faces, extending her empathic senses to detect any trace of malice or deception. She found nervousness, excitement, skepticism, and awe in abundance, but nothing that triggered immediate alarm. Hammond and his known allies were conspicuously absent, which only heightened her unease. Where were they? What had they planned? The ceremony progressed through its initial stages, ritual washing of hands in moon water, the exchange of clan tokens, the recitation of ancient vows. With each completed step, the bond between Elena and Mason strengthened visibly. Silver light emanated from her crescent mark, while a matching glow began to manifest around Mason's heart, the physical manifestation of the Stormheart royal essence. "Now comes the reading of the covenant," Lady Victoria announced, "the sacred pact between bloodlines that this union fulfills." Victor stepped forward, placing the Winter Covenant book upon the altar. The silver clasps sprang open at Elena's proximity, pages turning of their own accord until they settled on the prophecy's text. Elena placed her marked hand upon the page and began to read in the ancient wolf tongue, her voice taking on resonant qualities that filled the chamber. As she read, the words became visible in the air above the altar, glowing silver symbols that transformed into images. The original betrayal during the Red War, the curse's creation, the scattered moon-silver wolves, and finally the prophesied reunion that would heal both bloodlines and unite all packs once more. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembly as the territory leaders witnessed history's truth rather than the sanitized version passed down through generations. Some faces registered shock, others guilt, still others a dawning hope. The final words of the prophecy hung in the air. When forgiveness flows from the last moon-silver heart, the curse shall break, the packs shall unite, and a new era shall dawn under the true alpha pair. Lady Victoria raised her ceremonial staff. The time of fulfillment is upon us. Let the final binding commence. This was the moment, the ritual that would complete their mate bond, break the curse, and change the territories forever. Mason and Elena faced each other across the altar, their hands joined above the open covenant. The silver glow from her wrist and his chest intensified, reaching toward each other like living tendrils of light. By blood and bond, by claw and fang, by heart and soul, they recited in unison, the traditional words taking on new power as the prophecy's energy built around them. The chamber's massive windows captured the full moon directly overhead, its light focusing through ancient crystals to create a perfect circle of illumination around the altar. Within this sacred space, time seemed to slow, the world outside fading to insignificance as the bond prepared for completion. Then, just as their joined hands began the final ritual motion, a commotion erupted at the chamber's entrance. Guards shouted warnings, weapons clashed, and the heavy doors burst open. Governor Hammond stood in the doorway, Diana at his side. Behind them surged dozens of red-masked figures, overwhelming the royal guards through sheer numbers. Blood-stained Hammond's formal attire, evidence of the violence that had preceded his arrival. "The ceremony ends now," he declared, his voice carrying an unnatural resonance that echoed through the sacred space. In his hand, he clutched a ceremonial dagger dripping with fresh blood. "The moon-silver line ends tonight." Mason moved protectively in front of Elena, his alpha presence filling the chamber with palpable authority. "You're too late, Hammond. The bond is nearly complete. The prophecy fulfills even now." Hammond's face contorted with cold fury. "Nothing is complete until blood seals it, Stormheart." He raised the bloody dagger. "And I've already begun the counter-ritual with moon-silver blood." Horror washed through Elena as she recognized the significance of his words. "Celine," she whispered, searching frantically for her stepsister who had been standing with the attendants just moments before. Diana stepped forward, satisfaction evident in her cruel smile. "My dear sister volunteered her contribution when properly persuaded. Not pure moon silver, but enough for our purposes." Rage unlike anything Elena had ever experienced surged through her veins. The crescent mark blazed like a miniature sun, responding to her emotions. "What have you done to her?" "Nothing compared to what awaits you," Hammond replied coldly. He gestured to his red-masked followers, who began to spread around the chamber's perimeter. "The red masks have safeguarded the territories for centuries. We will not allow some half-forgotten prophecy to destroy what we've built." General Blackthorne and his loyal guards formed a protective ring around the altar, but they were outnumbered. Many of the assembled dignitaries shrank back in fear, while others moved to stand with the defenders, territorial differences momentarily forgotten in the face of this sacrilege. Mason's eyes met with Elena's across the altar, unspoken understanding passing between them. The ceremony had to continue. The bond had to complete. Everything else was secondary. "Victor," Mason called calmly, never taking his eyes from Elena, "proceed with the binding." The old advisor nodded grimly, returning to the altar despite the chaos unfolding around them. He guided their hands back to the proper position above the covenant book, resuming the interrupted ritual. "You dare," Hammond snarled, striding forward with unnatural speed. "Guards, seize them!" Red-masked figures surged toward the altar, only to collide with General Blackthorne's defensive line. Combat erupted throughout the sacred chamber, the clash of weapons desecrating space unused to violence. Mason held his position, determined to complete the ceremony despite the battle raging around them. The bond must complete, Victor instructed urgently. Focus only on each other. Let everything else fall away. Elena tried to obey, concentrating on the connection between herself and Mason. The silver light from her mark reached once more for the glow emanating from his chest. Their eyes locked, the world narrowing to just the two of them amidst the chaos. By moon's witness, by blood's calling, by fate's design, Victor continued, his voice rising above the sounds of conflict. Two become one. Division ends. Unity begins. The binding energy built between them, a tangible force that hummed with ancient power. Elena could feel the curse's structure within it, a twisted, malevolent thread woven through the Stormheart bloodline. Beside it ran another thread of power, darker and newer, the Red Mask's parasitic connection, drawing strength from the imbalance the curse created. She could break both with a single act of forgiveness. The knowledge came to her through the moon-silver blood awakening fully in her veins. Forgiveness not just for Mason's ancestor, but for all that had followed. The persecution, the hiding, the generations of suffering. The moment of choice arrived as their joined hands completed the ritual motion. Light exploded between them, suspending them in a bubble of silver radiance that temporarily shielded them from the battle raging throughout the chamber. Within this protected space, Elena met Mason's gaze. I forgive, she whispered. Not just your bloodline's betrayal, but everything that followed. I release the curse. The words unlocked something profound within her. Elena felt her healing abilities surge forward, channeling not into her own power, but into the curse's unmaking. The twisted thread within the bond began to unravel, centuries of malevolent energy dissipating under her moon-silver touch. Hammond sensed what was happening. With a howl of rage, he broke through the defensive line, the bloody dagger raised high. I'll end this myself. Victor, seeing the governor's charge, moved with unexpected speed for his age. He placed himself directly in Hammond's path, between the threat and the completing bond. No more, old friend, Victor said quietly as Hammond reached him. The time of shadows ends. Hammond's dagger plunged forward, finding its mark in Victor's chest. The old advisor made no attempt to avoid the blow, accepting it to buy the precious seconds the binding ritual needed. Victor! Mason's anguished cry tore through the chamber as his oldest friend and advisor collapsed. The sight of Victor falling, his life's blood staining the sacred stones, threatened to break Elena's concentration. But through their nearly completed bond, she felt Mason's determination surge, steadying her resolve. They could not falter now. Victor's sacrifice demanded fulfillment. The silver bubble around them intensified, drawing power from the moonlight streaming through the crystal windows. Within this protected space, their joined hands completed the final motion of the ancient ritual. It is done, Elena whispered, as the bond snapped into place with the finality of destiny fulfilled. Power exploded outward from the altar, a shockwave of silver light that swept through the entire chamber. Where it touched Red Mask members, their masks crumbled to dust. The parasitic power they had drawn from the curse suddenly severed. Many collapsed, their strength deserting them as the source of their unnatural abilities vanished. Hammond alone remained standing, his red mask dissolved but his hatred intact. What have you done? He roared, staring at his empty hands where the dagger had disintegrated. Broken the curse, Mason replied, his voice resonating with new authority as the completed bond transformed him as well. Ended your power, fulfilled the prophecy. The silver light continued to spread, racing beyond the chamber walls, beyond the palace, beyond the city. Elena could feel it flowing through the territories, dissolving the artificial boundaries that had divided the packs for centuries. Wolf called to wolf across arbitrary borders, the primal connection between all their kind reawakening after generations of suppression. One pack, Elena stated, the words carrying the weight of prophecy fulfilled, as it was always meant to be. Hammond staggered back, his face contorted with disbelief as everything he had worked for, everything the Red Mask had maintained for centuries, unraveled in moments. You've destroyed order, he accused, released chaos. We've restored balance, Mason corrected. The rest will follow. With the ceremony complete and the bond sealed, Mason moved to where Victor lay. Elena joined him, kneeling beside the fallen advisor. Blood pooled beneath him, his breathing shallow but his eyes clear as they found Mason's face. "Did we succeed?" Victor asked weakly. "Yes," Mason confirmed, taking his mentor's hand. "The bond is complete. The curse is broken. You did not sacrifice in vain." A smile touched Victor's weathered face. "I have served 3 generations of Stormhearts, waited all my life to see the prophecy fulfilled." His gaze shifted to Elena. "The Moon-Silver Queen returns. The circle completes." Elena placed her marked wrist over Victor's wound, willing her healing power to flow. But the energy that had surged so strongly moments before now felt distant, redirected. "My healing ability," she whispered, remembering the prophecy's warning. "It's been channeled into breaking the curse." "As was foretold," Victor nodded, acceptance in his fading eyes. "A worthy exchange." "There must be something we can do," Mason insisted, unwilling to lose the man who had been father, advisor, and friend to him. Victor's grip on Mason's hand tightened briefly. "Rule wisely," he instructed. "Rule together. Make this sacrifice matter." His gaze grew distant, seeing beyond the chamber's confines. "I go to join those who waited so long for this day. The circle completes." With those words, Victor's eyes closed for the final time, his last breath escaping in a peaceful sigh. Mason bowed his head, grief momentarily overwhelming even the triumph of the fulfilled prophecy. Around them, the chaos had subsided. Hammond's followers, stripped of their red mask power, had surrendered or fled. General Blackthorn's forces secured the chamber, restoring order with practiced efficiency. The territory leaders who had witnessed everything stood in stunned silence, processing the implications of what they had seen. Elena rose slowly, her hand finding Mason's shoulder in silent support. Through their completed bond, she could feel his grief, his determination, his love, emotions flowing freely between them now, unhindered by barriers of flesh or formality. Hammond remained defeated but defiant, held firmly by royal guards. "What now, your majesties?" he sneered, the title a mockery on his lips. "Execute me as a traitor? Make me a martyr to those who still believe in the territory system?" Mason stood, his grief channeling into resolved authority. "No, you will live to witness everything you fought against. To see the territories unite, the pacts merge, the new era dawn. Your punishment is to become irrelevant to history's course." Hammond's expression revealed this fate was worse than death to a man who had built his existence around power and manipulation. Before he could respond, Diana broke free from the guards restraining her. Lunging toward Elena with hatred blazing in her eyes. "You stole everything from me," she hissed, fingers curved like claws. "The crown that should have been mine. The power. The future." Elena caught her stepsister's wrists, holding her at bay without difficulty. Through their contact, Elena sensed the damaged soul beneath Diana's beautiful exterior. Years of Cordelia's manipulation, red mask indoctrination, and her own thwarted ambition, creating a perfect storm of hatred. "I stole nothing from you, Diana," Elena said softly. "You were never meant for this path." "Liar," Diana spat. "I was groomed from childhood to be queen. Mother promised me the crown if I played my part." "Cordelia used you, just as Hammond used her," Elena replied. "The Red Mask never intended any of you to rule. You were tools, nothing more." Diana's struggles subsided slightly, confusion flickering across her features. "You're lying. Mother had a place in their inner circle. She told you what Hammond instructed her to say," Elena interrupted gently. "Why do you think he disposed of her so easily when she failed? Why do you think he was willing to sacrifice Celine for his ritual?" Doubt crept into Diana's expression for the first time. "Where is Celine? What have they done with her?" "Find her," Elena instructed the guards. "She must have been kept somewhere in the palace for the ritual to work with fresh blood." As the guards departed on their urgent mission, Mason addressed the assembled witnesses, territory leaders, nobles, and common wolves alike, who had observed history's pivot point. "Tonight marks the beginning of transformation," he declared. "The curse that has plagued the Stormheart line for centuries is broken. The artificial boundaries between our territories will dissolve, not overnight, but gradually and naturally as the pack bonds reestablish across arbitrary lines. Murmurs spread through the assembly, some fearful, others hopeful. Mason continued, his voice carrying the quiet authority of the true alpha. We do not seek to destroy what works within our current system. Towns will still need governance. Regions still need coordination. But the division of wolves into separate packs by territorial decree ends now. We are one pack again, as we were always meant to be by amigo. Lady Victoria stepped forward, bowing deeply to both Mason and Elena. The prophecy fulfills before our eyes, she announced, her voice quavering with emotion. The Moon Silver Queen returns. The curse breaks. The packs unite. One by one, the territory leaders approached the altar, bending knee to the united bloodlines that had fulfilled the ancient prophecy. Even those who had initially resisted the changes recognized the inevitable tide of history sweeping them forward. A commotion at the chamber entrance heralded the return of the guards, sent to search for Celine. They supported a pale but conscious figure between them, Elena's stepsister, bloodied but alive. Diana broke free from her captors, rushing to her sister's side with unexpected concern. Elena moved quickly to Celine, examining the ceremonial cut on her arm where Hammond had taken blood for his counter-ritual. Though Elena's healing ability remained redirected into breaking the curse, her moon-silver knowledge guided her hands as she bound the wound with a strip of fabric from her ceremonial gown. You're alive, Celine whispered, relief evident in her exhausted features. The ceremony completed, I felt it, even locked away. Like a wave washing through everything. Rest now, Elena soothed. You're safe. We succeeded. Diana hovered nearby, uncharacteristic uncertainty in her posture. Celine, I didn't know what they planned for you. Hammond said they only needed a token amount of blood for the ritual, that you wouldn't be harmed. Celine regarded her sister with tired eyes. You chose your side, Diana, as did I. What happens to us now? Diana asked, addressing the question to Elena rather than Mason, a subtle but significant acknowledgement of the new queen's authority. That depends on your choices going forward, Elena replied. The past cannot be undone, but the future remains unwritten. As dawn approached, the ceremonial chamber gradually emptied. Hammond and his captured followers were secured in the palace dungeons to await formal judgment. The territory leaders departed to begin the monumental task of explaining the night's events to their regions. Victor's body was prepared with all honors for a royal advisor's funeral. Finally, only Mason and Elena remained at the altar, their completed bond humming between them with harmonious energy. Through it, they shared grief for Victor, concern for the challenges ahead, and beneath it all, a profound joy at the destiny finally fulfilled. My queen, Mason said softly, the title no longer formal, but deeply personal. The path before us will not be easy. Elena took his hands, feeling the strength in them, strength now complemented and completed by her own. No worthwhile path ever is, she replied, but we walk it together. Mason raised her hands to his lips, kissing first her fingers, then the crescent mark that had led him to her. Together, he agreed, as it was always meant to be. 1 year later, Elena stood on the palace balcony overlooking the royal gardens, where workers made final preparations for the evening celebration. The territories, now called regions of the United Pack, had transformed gradually over the months since the curse broke. Some changes came easily, others with resistance, but the inexorable tide of reunification continued its steady progress. The palace itself had changed, shedding its forbidding formality for a more welcoming aspect. Windows once narrow and defensive had been widened to admit more light. Gardens once restricted to royal use now welcomed common wolves for certain festivals and ceremonies. Even the throne room had transformed, the single imposing seat replaced by twin thrones of equal size and prominence. Admiring the preparations? Mason asked, joining her on the balcony. He moved differently now, the weight of the curse lifted from his shoulders, his natural alpha presence complemented rather than burdened by his royal responsibilities. Remembering, Elena corrected, leaning into him as his arms encircled her from behind. 1 year ago today, we broke a centuries-old curse and changed the world. Mason rested his chin atop her head, their bodies fitting together with the practiced ease of mates who had weathered both triumph and challenge side by side. Some days it feels like yesterday, others like a lifetime ago. Through their bond, Elena sensed the complex emotions beneath his words. Pride in what they had accomplished, grief for Victor, who should have witnessed it all, determination to honor his sacrifice through wise leadership. He would be proud of what we've built, she said softly, answering his unspoken thoughts. And amused by how much resistance we still encounter, Mason added wryly. The Northern Province governors submitted another formal protest this morning against the open migration policy. Elena smiled, turning in his arms to face him. The same governors who complained last month that they needed more workers for their expanded mining operations? Perhaps we should introduce them to the concept of cause and effect. Mason's laugh rumbled through his chest. You've developed quite the diplomatic touch, my love, far more effective than my inclination to simply order compliance. Balance in all things, Elena replied, touching his face gently. Your strength, my persuasion. Your tradition, my innovation. Their conversation paused as Elena felt a flutter within her abdomen, the first movements of their child, conceived 3 months prior. Mason placed his hand over hers where it rested on her slightly rounded belly, wonder replacing amusement in his expression. Active today, he observed, reverence in his voice. She knows it's a special day, Elena replied. The knowledge that their child was a daughter had come to her through restored moon-silver intuition, her healing abilities having gradually returned in the months after the curse broke. The pregnancy itself represented the final breaking of the curse, proof that a Stormheart heir could be carried safely by a queen who loved him. The territories had rejoiced at the announcement, many of the remaining skeptics finally accepting that a new era had truly begun. Lady Victoria sent word that everything is prepared for the memorial ceremony, Mason said after a moment of shared connection with their unborn daughter. Celine has arranged the tribute flowers exactly as you requested. The day's celebrations would begin with a solemn remembrance of those lost, Victor foremost among them, but also others who had fallen during the Red Mask conflict. Even Cordelia would receive acknowledgement, her manipulation by Hammond and the Red Masks now fully understood through Diana's eventual testimony. Diana herself had surprised everyone in the aftermath. Initially held for judgment alongside Hammond, she had gradually revealed the extent of her mother's indoctrination, her own manipulation at Hammond's hands. Elena had advocated for leniency, recognizing the damaged child beneath the ambitious exterior. Now Diana served in the distant western region, using her political acumen in service to the United Pack rather than against it. In the Education Initiative presentation, Elena asked, returning to practical matters. The program to extend learning beyond nobility to all Pack children had been her first major project as queen, inspired by her own limited access to education under Cordelia's rule. The regional representatives are prepared, Mason confirmed. The first-year results have exceeded even your optimistic projections. Literacy rates increased 30% in the former border territories alone. Elena nodded with satisfaction. Knowledge belongs to all wolves, not just those born to privilege. The next phase will focus on technical training for... She stopped abruptly, her hand flying to her temple as a vision swept through her consciousness. Since the curse broke, her moon-silver abilities had evolved beyond healing to include occasional glimpses of possible futures, brief, intense moments of clarity that guided their most important decisions. Mason steadied her, familiar with these episodes. What do you see? Elena breathed deeply as the vision clarified. Our daughter grown, standing where we stand now, but the palace is different. The region's fully united. No more resistance, no more division. She leads not through dominance, but through connection. The vision shifted, revealing additional details. She bears the mark, Mason, the crescent moon. The moon-silver blood runs strong in her. As the vision faded, Elena opened her eyes to find Mason watching her with that particular expression that merged love, respect, and wonder in equal measure. Our legacy, he said simply. The beginning of one, she corrected. The united bloodlines continue through her. The healing continues through her. The afternoon sun bathed them in golden light as they stood together on the balcony, the past year's achievements spread before them. the future growing within Elena's body. From the gardens below came the sounds of preparation, voices calling instructions, music being rehearsed, the normal bustle of palace life continuing its rhythm. "We should prepare for the memorial ceremony," Mason said eventually. Solly, though he made no move to release her. "In a moment," Elena replied, savoring the peaceful interlude. "There's something I've been waiting to show you." She extended her marked wrist between them, palm upward. Concentrating briefly, she called forth the silver glow that had once been automatic, but now responded to conscious direction. As Mason watched, the light coalesced into a small, perfect replica of a wolf cub, running in circles above her palm. "Your light manipulation has advanced," Mason observed, impressed. The ability to shape the moon-silver energy had been her most recent development, manifesting just weeks earlier. "Watch," Elena instructed. The silver wolf cub paused in its playful circling, raising its miniature muzzle as if scenting the air. Then, with deliberate movements, it traced a pattern in the space between them. A crescent moon intersected by a crown, the ancient symbols of their bloodlines now united as one. "For tonight's ceremony," Selena explained as the image held steady, "a visible representation of what we've accomplished, what Victor died to protect." Mason touched the glowing symbol gently, his fingers passing through the light construct. "Perfect," he approved. "A reminder of where we came from and where we're going." The silver light faded gradually as Elena released the manifestation. Through their bond, she sensed Mason's pride, his contentment, his anticipation of the evening ceremonies and the years that would follow. "Shall we prepare to honor the past?" Elena suggested, "so we can properly celebrate the future?" Mason offered his arm formally, though his eyes held the intimate warmth reserved only for her. "Lead on, my queen." Together they left the balcony, moving through the palace that had once been the exclusive domain of Stormheart kings and would now witness the reign of the united bloodlines. Servants and advisors bowed respectfully as they passed, many offering congratulations on the anniversary and well wishes for the coming child. That evening, as moonlight once again filled the ceremonial chamber where destiny had fulfilled 1 year prior, Elena and Mason stood before their assembled people. The memorial ceremony had concluded with dignity and respect, Victor's contributions honored with a permanent monument in the palace gardens. Now the celebration of unity commenced, marking both the anniversary of the broken curse and the promise of the future growing within Elena. Celine approached the royal couple, carrying a silver chalice filled with the ceremonial moon water. As Mason's chosen second and Elena's most trusted advisor, she had found her own place in the new order, her partial moon-silver heritage respected rather than hidden. "To remembrance and renewal," Celine offered, presenting the chalice first to Elena, then to Mason after she drank. When both had partaken of the ritual water, Mason addressed the gathered assembly. "1 year ago, centuries of division began to heal. One pack, as we were always meant to be." "One pack," the assembly echoed, the response carrying none of the hesitation or resistance that had marked early ceremonies. Elena stepped forward, her hand resting lightly on her rounded abdomen. "Tonight we honor those who preserved the truth through generations of darkness. Those who kept the moon-silver knowledge alive when others would have extinguished it. Those who safeguarded the prophecy until the time of fulfillment arrived." She raised her marked wrist, calling forth the silver light to create the united symbol of crown and crescent above the assembly. Gasps of appreciation rose from those witnessing the manifestation for the first time, the beautiful construct rotating slowly in the chamber center. "The past is honored," Elena continued. "The present is secured." She lowered her hand to her abdomen in a gesture all understood. "The future approaches." The celebration continued into the night, formality gradually giving way to genuine joy as music filled the chamber once reserved for solemn ceremonies alone. Elena and Mason moved among their people, accepting congratulations, discussing regional concerns, embodying the united leadership the prophecy had promised. As midnight approached, they slipped away from the festivities, seeking a moment of privacy in the palace gardens. The monument to Victor stood in moonlight, his likeness captured with dignity and strength, the inscription below reading simply, "He witnessed the fulfillment." Elena placed her hand on the cool stone, sensing Mason's emotions through their bond as he did the same. He should be here, Mason said softly, to see what his sacrifice made possible. Perhaps he does see, Elena suggested. The old stories say those who pass beyond remain connected to those they loved in life. They stood in silence for a moment, honoring the man who had preserved knowledge through generations, who had recognized Elena for what she was that first night, who had given his life to ensure the prophecy fulfilled. Eventually, they continued their walk through the moonlit gardens, following a path that led to a small, secluded grove. Here, on their wedding night 6 months earlier, they had exchanged private vows far from the formal ceremony demanded by tradition. Here, they had conceived the child now growing within Elena's womb. Mason guided her to the stone bench at the grove's center, sitting beside her with their hands naturally intertwined. 1 year, he marveled, from locked in a cellar to queen of the United Territories. Even the old tales don't contain such transformations. Elena leaned against his shoulder, contentment flowing through her. The cellar seems like another lifetime, another person entirely. Not entirely, Mason corrected gently. That girl's strength, her resilience, her capacity to forgive, those created the queen you've become. Elena considered this, recognizing the truth in his words. Just as the king you are now contains echoes of the boy who lost his father too young, who carried a curse not of his making, who fought against shadows for a future he couldn't fully envision. Their bond hummed between them, strengthened by mutual understanding that transcended words. In that sacred space of complete acceptance, Elena shared the full vision she had experienced earlier. Not just their daughter grown, but generations beyond her. The united bloodlines creating leaders who guided with wisdom rather than force, who healed rather than conquered. A legacy worthy of everything we've sacrificed, Mason acknowledged when the sharing concluded. Everything will continue to build. As they sat beneath the midnight sky, the child within Elena stirred again, responding perhaps to her mother's emotions or simply announcing her own awakening presence in the world. Mason placed his hand over the movement, wonder replacing the habitual authority in his expression. She will never know division, he promised, never experience the curse, never fear the shadows we banished. She will know only the united pack, Elena agreed, the healed bloodlines, the fulfilled prophecy. The future stretched before them, not without challenges, but free from the ancient curse that had twisted fate for generations. One pack, united under the true alpha pair. One bloodline, Stormheart and Moonsilver merged at last. One destiny, fulfilled against all odds. Elena raised her face to the moon above, sensing its ancient connection to her bloodline. The crescent mark on her wrist pulsed gently, acknowledging its celestial counterpart. Mason's arm tightened around her shoulders, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. Thank you, he said suddenly, his voice soft with emotion. For what? Elena asked, though their bond conveyed his meaning even before words could form. For forgiving a betrayal you never experienced. For healing a curse you never created. For loving a man you barely knew because fate declared it so. Elena turned to face him fully, framing his face between her hands. In the moonlight, silver threaded through his dark hair gleamed like stars captured in midnight. His eyes, once haunted by the curse's shadow, now reflected only strength and certainty. Some souls recognize each other across time, she said softly. Some destinies intertwine so completely that resistance becomes unthinkable. Some loves transcend circumstance, logic, even fate itself. Their lips met in the moonlit grove, the kiss conveying everything words could not. The journey completed, the challenges overcome, the future embraced together. When they parted, the connection remained, flowing through the bond that had transformed not just their lives, but the world around them. Shall we return to our guests? Mason asked eventually, though his expression suggested preference for their private sanctuary. Elena smiled, rising from the bench with her hand still clasped in his. For a little while longer, then we can slip away again. After all, we have a future to prepare for. Hand in hand, they walked back toward the celebration, toward the people who had witnessed history's turning point, toward the united pack they now led together. Behind them, moonlight illuminated the grove where they had shared private promises. For them stretched a path once hidden by curse and shadow, now bright with possibility. The girl once locked in a cellar and the king once bound by ancient tragedy had found each other against impossible odds, had broken curses and fulfilled prophecies, had transformed not just their lives, but the world itself. Now they walked toward their future with confidence born of trials overcome and destiny embraced, the united bloodlines continuing through the daughter who would one day stand where they stood now. One pack, one destiny, one love powerful enough to heal centuries of division. The circle completed at last.